Yeah,
All
somebody
right.
else I know uses it too, and I think he liked it because he said like it has something to do with like my end of the hosting. So no matter what happens, like if there's an issue, that yeah, he just did one. He's a European booktuber, and he was like, yeah, I prefer this because if anything happens, as long as you have internet connection, it'll still upload fine and whatever. Which I
Yep.
thought was fascinating.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting stuff. Well, hello, my friends. Thank you for joining me. I'm Nicholas W. Fuller, and this is Person Behind the Pages, the show where we get to know the creators that make the things we love. Tonight, I'm joined for a second time by the wonderful RR Virdi. How you doing, Rondi?
I'm great, and it's great to be back here with you, man.
Yeah, good to chat with you again. Got some new stuff to talk about, don't
Mm-hmm.
we?
Mm-hmm.
Little book coming out
Absolutely.
pretty soon. Cool.
Yeah. I did the unboxing today too for book two, The Doors of Midnight. I actually thought I had my copies here, but I'm very bad with that. I
Fair enough.
always box them back up, and I keep them really safe. And like, because I end up giving some of the early copies always away to people, or mailing them to people who've been really sweet who want them early. And I've been really fortunate with a lot of support, so I end up just giving them away. So like, I got it, and I didn't even put my own. I don't even have a copy for myself yet out. Like, they just went back in the box after I did the unboxing. So I should have actually held one out for this. I feel really bad about that. I'm
Nah, it's
sorry.
okay.
Well, it would have been
You'll
nice
just
to
have to
have it for
trust
you.
us that the book is
Yes,
coming.
yes, yes. It is coming. I actually found out most bookstores will probably be getting it in early because there's no embargo. So I shouldn't be saying this, but like it will be. You'll probably see it on a store shelf. I mean, it's just going to be there like
Ooh.
before the release date, likely. That does happen. Like there's no point in hiding it, right? If someone is a fan and they go to a bookstore, there's a chance before release date they'll see it on
No exclusive. Go out and get it now. You can do it.
the shelf. It hasn't reached it yet, at least that I'm aware of in U.S. stores. But like, I wouldn't be surprised if next week.
Hey, what's up, Jackson? I see you in the chat. Thanks for hanging out, bud. Um, we are doing good. Everything's good, Jackson. What's good with you? Um, So Ronnie,
Mm-hmm.
obviously it's The Doors of Midnight is the sequel
Mm-hmm.
to the first binding, and it's coming out in what, a few weeks, I think,
Yeah,
is
a
the
couple
official
weeks.
release.
August 13th in the U.S., which is a Tuesday, and they do that on Tuesdays because I only recently learned this. The bestseller list starts Monday, but all your pre-orders, weirdly, like in computer systems, can trigger a day early. So if the book came out on Monday, your pre-orders could trigger Sunday, which is the end of the last week, and it could like split your bestseller chances or whatever for making the list like into like the previous week to that.
Yep.
And they just it's become an ingrained system for everybody, just in case whatever author is debuting might be there. You might as well help them get the best chance to get the list.
Yeah. The thing, like, I've heard that before, and that makes total sense, and I get it. What's up, Bo? It's definitely Bo time. um, but like, I find it interesting that indies follow that same thing too. When I don't think it's nearly as relevant for indies, but it seems like it's just the expected thing that like Tuesdays are release day.
Yeah,
You know?
well, now indies have gotten better treatment, thank God. That I think a lot more indies still get some consideration for some lists.
Right.
I don't know if I should say it, but like New York Times is still, from what at least I've heard, is very notorious. Like doesn't give indies a lot of shot, but like Wall Street Journal and USA Today are usually a lot nicer about that. They're usually more pure aggregate of the numbers that they get in the end, right? Like
Yeah.
if you hit the numbers for USA Today, you will show up unless like some mega monster Stephen King launches on your day and starts the bestseller list trending at like the highest possible number of sales.
Right.
But
Right.
otherwise, like you have a better chance of hitting those lists. Whereas New York Times is very opaque in how they curate and have their list made.
Yeah.
They don't release numbers, so nobody actually knows.
Yeah. Uh, Bo's in chat. Have you seen Jackson
Oh, hey, Bo.
Dickard's show Between Two Perns?
No, but I am familiar with him. I've actually met him at Dragon Con and then New York Comic Con last year.
Nice, nice. So Bo's asking Jackson when you're going to be on Between Two Perns.
And he actually offered that me in New York, and then I couldn't get in touch with him. I think he was busy, and like I know he interviewed a few people, and then like I ended up getting busy at the con, and we just never reconnected.
Nice.
But yeah, he was super sweet there. I had lunch with him and Bryce O'Connor of Wraithmark, who was also
Yeah.
super sweet and a wonderful gentleman.
Don't let him fool you though. I mean, Jackson seems nice. I talked to him, but like, you get on his show and he's going to skewer you. You know, that's what he does, right?
Right, that makes sense if it's the whole Zach Galifianakis thing, right? That's
Yes.
a parody of yeah.
Yep. 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 It seems fun. Um, I don't know if I have the cojones to let him roast me like that. I don't know. I don't know what he would find. I don't know. Jackson, if
Yeah.
you've got stuff to roast me, let me know in chat. Like, what would I get roasted about? But anyway, yeah, man. So exciting stuff, man. That's pretty cool that books are starting to get out there. You can maybe pick it
Yeah,
up.
yeah.
Um, And I seen early reviews are coming in and it's really strong, right?
Yeah, yeah. I haven't seen too many myself. I've had some sense on me. I've just been in the trenches. I try not to look because like this is something like actors have talked about too, like not seeing or getting into their own hype or the ups or downs of either of it. Because like at some point, like it's out of your control, right? Like I wrote the book, it's
Yeah,
done, it's turned in.
yeah.
I have very little to almost zero control of how it's
You,
received.
especially because you tried. I imagine you turned it in like a while ago, right?
So the funny thing with book two is it is like the weirdest, but like also I was warned about this. This happens traditional before I went traditional from indie.
Yeah.
I turned in book two before book one was even out. So I actually remember because I was at a cabin that I specifically went to finish book two on time or early. Um, which just sucks because I actually go to this cabin a lot as like my reprieve, and I've never actually once gone there as a vacation. It's always been to finish a book,
Mm,
specifically a Tales of Tremaine project. I will be going back there this fall to continue working on book three. So I've never had a vacation there, but I finished book two there and turned it in July 14th. So about a month and 2 days before book one came out.
wow.
And then a lot of business industry delay stuff happened because book two was originally supposed to be out October 2013. And my editor disappeared for about 6 months. And then they
Cool.
were let go because it wasn't just me, obviously. Like most editors have like, three, four, five, maybe six clients.
Yeah.
So there were a whole lot of us that didn't get edits for 6 months. And then I was without an editor for I want to say like almost end of spring 2024. Definitely wasn't summer. By summer, I most certainly had my editor and I got my first round of book two edits. But the original date we wanted book two out was October 3rd. I remember because I was making Full Metal Alchemist memes because it was the date in Edward's the Pocket Watch for the Elric brothers. It was like October 3rd, whatever the year was. So like I was saying October 3rd, and you'd open the M and it was doors at midnight. And I'm not gonna lie, I felt pretty foolish, like publishing stuff outside of my control, like led to book two being delayed, and yeah,
I mean, yeah, like you said, it's out of your control. It happens.
yeah,
It's
it
all
worked
good.
out
I
great
think
this year though, because like the eclipse on the cover, and this is the year of the eclipse. So I was like, I took it as like a good little sign.
it's a good,
I
yeah,
get to have
good.
the only eclipse book of the year, the eclipse.
There you go. Smart, smart. That's pretty good. It's incredible that yeah, it's been so long. Well, I'll tell you, the reviews I've seen have looked pretty good. I'm glad. It's
Oh,
smart that
thank
you're
you.
not looking, but
Yeah,
that's
yeah. I just gotta focus on book three and get that done, and then
sure.
the novella project. Yeah, because you're in my Discord. Yeah, I think you've seen some of the stuff for that. Yeah.
Just a little bit. Tell everyone else.
Oh yeah. So as like a loving thank you to everyone who's been so kind and supportive, and it helped book one especially out earn in the time frame that it did. I want to create a bunch of stories that don't have room in the novels and I don't have a contract for, but I want to like do a collection of things I'm passionate about in the universe and give them away for free.
Nice.
So like there'll be a digital ebook format at least that I can do for free, and I just got the cover in which I shared secretly with the group. I'm not gonna do a public unveiling until all the stories are done, but we have I can share one. So one is like a novella that takes place after the past of book one of Ari's life, kind of like on a school winter break, like a week of his adventures, and then it's mirrored by a short story of his that follows his cat's POV during that
Hmm.
exact same period of time. And then there's going to be a short story from the student Krisham. For those familiar with book one, he's a student who's incarcerated in the crow's nest, and you get a novella actually from his point of view. So it's going to be like a novel's worth of material over two very large stories and then one short one. And yeah, I just want to be able to get that done, hopefully, and have it out next year if I'm lucky. I don't know when because book three comes first. I have to make that commitment.
Sure.
So
Sure. That's rad. That's cool. So and people could join your Discord and learn a little bit more about it, right? And see the secret
oh,
stuff and
yeah,
stuff.
yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. I do occasionally leak the Discord link so people can join if they want. There's like no requirement except just be really kind.
Yeah.
Like because
Don't be
we
a
are really
dick.
fortunate. Yeah,
Good
yeah.
rule
I
for
mean that.
life.
Yeah, I didn't know
Yeah.
if I could curse here. I forgot. But yes, yeah, that. We are really fortunate in a really loving, supportive community where because there's a high degree of people with mental illness, especially within SFF the arts. Neuroscience has shown that. I don't know if it's like we go there because we have mental illness or like it attracts that. There's actually a place for people to just talk about their mental health, and it has no affiliation with my books. Like if people just need a safe place, like to chill, I kind of want a Discord that was built that.
I love that. I love that. Very nice. Yeah. Yeah. I love bookish people because
Mm-hmm.
they tend to be kind people, Jackson aside, but they tend to be kind people and they like they want to kind of be find like welcoming to each other and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
um So what was, I mean, obviously book two you were writing before book one even released, so that was like an interesting thing. Let's talk. I want like what was the process like? I mean, you obviously you've written other books before, but you know, did you kind of have the what do they call it? The like the sophomore book blues, you know, or
No,
like you know the
no, because I've written other book twos before, and in this
yeah.
one, when I was writing it, book one was almost accepted as perfectly as the original draft was. So I was very fortunate that I knew I wouldn't have to change anything, so I could just machine gun book two. The reason I didn't start book three immediately after was because like I heard these stories before, like book two usually within editing, and my book two is also very large. You're gonna face a lot more resistance,
Hmm.
and if you commit too early to book three, you might end up just rewriting all of it. And I saw Delilah Dawson actually talk about when to start your books and when not as a career author. This was a long time ago. In fact, I hadn't even published Tales of Tremaine yet, but she talked about this with book two to threes or fours or fives. Like, there's so much that happens in publishing that if you commit too early, like you turn the draft for book two, you haven't even got your edits yet, you start writing. Let's say you get 100K in, they'll just say, yeah, we want to change these scenes specifically. That can scrap all of that. And in the story I'm telling, where it's past and present so intricately tied together, that is exactly what would have happened. Thankfully, I didn't start it then. I was more just anticipating my edits, which unfortunately, the whole scenario I talked about, they didn't come for almost a year. Um, but we had to cut at least 70K of book two. A lot of that for print cost reasons, and there were some irrevocable changes, which I'm still okay with. But they do force me to like really rethink book three because one entire character arc is gone. Like it just doesn't exist from the original book two that I wanted to pay off in book three. So my choice for that, because I don't want to spoil this, is either do I introduce and then finish it all in book three, or do
Hmm.
I establish it the way I wanted in book two, and then pay it off in book four, five, or six. And I don't know because again, I only sold a contract for the first three, and I'm trying to weigh what is best for the fans because that they come first, right? That's what allows me to do this. And something Butcher taught me about like emotional catharsis and the proper payoff and structure. My fear is I don't want to overly squish that in and make it a fast build up and a fast payoff versus what the series has promised, a slow cathartic build up for that emotional catharsis at the end that feels really properly built up to. And a great example of this that I like is the Captain America reveal when he picks up Mjolnir. So if I remember
Hmm.
correctly, in the actual comic where it happens, he just picks it up casually and hands it back to Thor. But in the MCU, the movies, we got teased that for so many movies where we learn about the worthiness of it. Where in Age of Ultron, he just like teases like jiggling it a little, and then we have to wait till the fourth Avengers, not even third, but Endgame, where we finally get that reveal. Well, because they built it up so well, it was absolutely amazing. And they did the exact same thing with the Thor fight. Like we got a teaser of it, Thor versus Hulk in the first one, and then we got the Hulk Buster versus Hulk, and then we didn't get it until Thor Ragnarok, the actual full Thor versus Hulk fight.
Yeah.
Um, but they tease those comic legendary moments really well and for the perfect build up, and I'm a huge admirer of that because you only get one chance to do that, and your fans deserve like the best iteration that you're capable of doing it for.
Right. Yeah. You know, I was just saying like some like meme online of that like iconic Avengers Assemble scene from
Mm-hmm.
Endgame. Oh my god, like how good is that? I feel like
Mm-hmm.
genuinely I feel like that's one of like our generation's best moments of cinema.
Absolutely, and they
You know?
built that over God, how many years? Wait, when did Endgame come out? I forgot because I remember when it started, it was 2018, and I remember that specifically because I was a senior in high school and I was skipping classes to go see Iron Man over and over. Because it was revolutionary and had a car at the time, right? So it was like
Yeah.
we were doing what is it like? Was it what are the exams? It was like SATs or whatever. Yeah, whatever the
Yeah,
test
yeah,
is you take
yeah,
for
yeah.
college, and then no, the IB exam. So there's two things like
Oh,
AP and
sure.
IB.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was in IB, and I was like, I'm not passing these IB exams, and I actually did end up passing, but like one of them was like a history thing, and I just wrote an entire essay about Darth Vader because I wanted to go see Iron Man. I was like, I need to write something they're gonna watch. Like, I intentionally failed that. Like, thankfully, we're way past it. I failed that exam. I just wrote a whole essay about Darth Vader as fast as I could, turned it in because when
That
you
is
were done with the exams, you were allowed to leave. You could leave
so
school.
on
So I was like,
brand for a
yeah,
fantasy author.
right? I was like, yeah, Darth Vader, boom. I was like, hey, I'm done. Turned it in 5 pages. And then I just got in my car with my best friends. Like, you want to see Iron Man? He's like, I didn't even do mine because he just didn't care. And I was like, yeah, let's go see Iron Man again.
Let's do it. Yeah, yeah.
Let's do it. So, like, when was Endgame, man? Because, like, that was like at least 10 years of a build up, and it was the
Right.
perfect build up.
Oh my yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But I feel so like not to you know, I mean to take anything away from that because it was epic, but like
Mm-hmm.
I mean that is I think the problem with MCU right now is like how do you where do you go from there, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's just so
I
they
actually think what Brandon Sanderson is doing is the right move. Where if I understand correctly, the way he structured Stormlight is this is like a big climax for the first arc, and he's
Right.
taking a break. I think he did say this. Like he's taking a few years break. I don't know the number of years, but to work on other things, push his skills, and then come back and reinvigorate the series. And I think breaks are also good for audiences, like a certain level of pause for appreciation, for rereads, to let something sit. In his case, we know he's not going to be idle. He's developed a very prolific reputation, or at least he'll put out other stuff.
Right. Right.
Um,
There'll be another secret project somewhere.
Yes, that, or he's just gonna have, like, sell new books and contracts or kicks or something, right? Like I don't want to
Yeah.
anticipate what, because he's at the point of career where he's also allowed to do anything. There's zero
Yeah.
restrictive covenants in his contracts, I assume, or he's just big enough that he's inured to the consequences, which
Yeah.
is really good because it allows him to do really cool stuff for the fans and other authors to take inspiration from.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Pretty amazing to see. I totally agree with you too. I mean I know like a lot of people really love kind of the Netflix model where they just drop everything all at
Mm-hmm.
once. But I like I mean to me there was a great joy in like Game of Thrones when it was originally
Mm-hmm.
airing and
Mm-hmm.
watching like each episode each week with some friends and like talking about it and discussing it and getting like hype for the next
The
week, you know
water
what I mean?
cooler effect, yeah. There's a
Yeah,
real
like
thing that actually there's a great study that discusses that's actually part of what led to HBO's success with The Sopranos, because they
mhm.
didn't drop it all out and it allowed things to build up for that structure. And there was a lot of interpersonal discussion and word of mouth week to week and speculation. And fan theories do fuel a lot of extra exogenous engagement
Right.
for outside of the series that helps keep you talking on people's lips rather than binge it and then they forget or not care or it has like a short burst effect moment.
Yep. Yep. I think it's the way to go.
No, I
Um
agree.
all right. So,
Mm-hmm.
well, for anyone I want kind of a little bit I want to get into talking about mythology and whatnot with you because it just sounds like a lot of fun. I know like it's an area that you are incredibly knowledgeable about. But I want to kind of put a little cap on discussing about your books first. If anyone hasn't read the first binding, which of course is the book one, and Doors of Midnight is book two. If anyone hasn't read the first binding, you can kind of give a little bit of a pitch for that, and then a little bit of a pitch for book two.
Yeah. So the first binding starts off with Ari, who is a famous legendary storyteller who is kind of trying to like hide and outrun his past while trying to pursue something in the present. And he starts the job audition as a storyteller in a local tavern, trying to make room and board for the night, while also teasing that he's looking for a few things. A really important story in that you learn later he's trying to kill a prince in that local country he's in, and then he runs into an enigmatic, mysterious singer who realizes that he's either the greatest villain or hero, or perhaps both, from all these legendary stories. However, these are stories that have been co-opted and assumed by other cultures along a fictional Silk Road in my world. So like it's no longer all his name and all his deeds. Like it's all these different reputations, kind of like what's happened with real mythology and mythological heroes, where there's similar beats and retellings and reimaginings throughout time. Very similar characters, like how the Odyssey and the Iliad have similar beats to the South Asian epics, and that there's certain etymological links between certain names of gods and heroes and heroic beats. And it follows mostly Ari's present day journey to sort of kill that prince he's talking about, at least in book one. Whether he does it or not, I'm not going to spoil. And searching for that story while slowly falling in love with that singer, and then telling his past story of how a lot of those legends came to be. And book two picks up immediately after the ramifications of book one's ending, including a sort of 2 week winter break in Ari's past life. So there is a gap where in the past life it's not immediately, but it's immediately enough. Imagine you have like a winter break at school, 2 weeks off, and then you do that, which is why I wrote the novella that I want to give away for free because that actually takes place during that fun little 2 weeks, and
Ooh,
it's self-contained, so people can read it actually even without reading book one.
that's always a nice way to go with novellas. All right, all right, exciting stuff. I got you. Yeah,
Oh right, I didn't
great.
even talk about book two. Oops. Like I just barely mentioned. But, like what happens in
Sure.
book two without spoiling it is, besides picking up some ramifications of book one, it's more of you see in the present day Ari trying to fulfill that quest even further and dealing with courtly politics, like backstabbing nobles and murders. There is a trial for regicide in book two, and then in the past story, it's a lot more adventures like on the road. I always wanted to do a great on the road adventure, so I finally get to do that about going along my fictional Silk Road a little bit more and exploring a new culture, where you get to maybe see like super cool desert nomadic warriors. You get to see Ari become an even better thief. I don't want to spoil how and what and where, and more of his
Ooh,
legends build up as well as paying off more of what I teased in book one.
nice, nice. So if you like book one, you're gonna get more awesomeness in book two, of course. Right? Like I love it, love it. So let's get into mythology a little bit. What like you kind of already mentioned like Silk Road. You mentioned mythology being similar in different cultures,
Mm-hmm.
largely the same, maybe with different names. But what were some of the like mythologies that inspired different elements of these stories?
Mm. Uh, so there's Proto-Indo-European, and a lot of what came out of that, which is obviously South Asian mythology, and particularly I draw more inspiration from the Vedic period. And for those who don't know, that's what predates the Hindu period, or where Hinduism came from. Originally, one of the oldest religions in India is Vedism, and from that Hinduism came out, and then Jainism and all the others. But I eventually chose the Vedic period because there's a lot of overlap with that, with parts of the Norse culture and especially the Greek, especially when you go back and look back at Proto-Indo-European culture from the etymology I've talked about, like Deus Veter, who is the original Sky Father or the Sky God, and the idea of heaven. And he actually exists by a very similar name in South Asian culture. He exists in the Greek culture as Zeus because Zeus's name is seems to be a cognate because it's the full title is like Zeus Pater, so it's like
Mm,
Zeus Pater, Sky Father, and the Roman was Deus Pater became Deu Pater became Dupater, which became Jupiter. And then we know in Latin also God is Deus. And that's just one beat. And I've talked about the overlap of the Sky Father, the Storm God theory of the storm gods who kill dragons, and how most of these cultures, like these cradle cultures that came out of Proto-Indo-European, all have a myth about a lightning associated storm god who kills a giant dragon or a giant serpent, like Dor versus Jormungandr, Indra versus Vitra, which Vitra is an Asura or a three-headed dragon who holds all the waters of the world hostage, who's large enough to do that, just like Jormungandr can embody all of the waters of the world. And both Indra and Vitra, both Indra and Thor slay their dragons respectively with a club or a warhammer that has all the powers of a lightning bolt or thunder in it. And they're not the only ones. Obviously, Zeus kills Tython, the hundred-headed dragon Titan, with a lightning bolt. And then there's something that usually gets passed down if you chain mythology from like a god to like a son of a god. In this case, Apollo kills Python, kind of in the name, and then Hercules later on, who's the demigod, kills the Hydra. And if you want to dial it up through different cultures and up to the west, there's the very famous painting Raphael's Saint George versus the Dragon, which is when humans started killing dragons and we became the dragon slayers. And there's this tradition in mythology from like the idea of the fire theft, which is very overall like common in a lot of cultures, and the use of our most powerful badass gods using lightning, that symbolically like fire and lightning are the tools humans most associate with war and destruction and power, and we worship and value and want to emulate either in our demigods, our heroes, and ourselves, just like the motif of dragon slaying. And I draw a lot from the cultures that do that. So if I have to pick the ones I definitely do focus and read a lot on more, it's going to be anything along the Silk Road, from India going east to Japan, and then the biggest would be obviously South Asian, Iranian, Norse, and Greek. So those
super.
four definitely, the last four I just mentioned, absolutely would be the most I do
Yeah,
read the most about.
that's super cool. But I love, I remember in our last chat we were talking about dragons and how it's amazing
Mm-hmm.
that like dragons have like penetrated culture worldwide, and it's
Mm-hmm.
interesting.
They
So
also
cool.
created the climax of a story, technically structured. I'm actually writing an essay about that now, but in a lot of epic stories, like obviously you have Beowulf, and then in the case of the Norse, you have Sigurd or Siegfried the Dragon Slayer. Killing Fafnir was a massive moment, and that is also what inspired the battle with Smaug in Lord of the Rings, because a lot of Tolkien's research came from the Finnish Kalevala and the Norse epics, and Smaug is quite literally Fafnir. Um, but dragon slaying, in terms of Vitra being killed by Indra, when Indra killed him, he became known as the slayer of the first obstacle. And the whole point structurally of the traditional story is to have an obstacle for the hero to overcome. The dragon, in a lot of the old dragon slaying myths, including like the knightly stories, is the obstacle. It became the climax. You must go defeat the dragon. And for heroic stories that followed that and how they're influenced by mythological, it's where the idea of the climactic villain sort of really comes from structurally, of like having something to put in place to defeat, to be the obstacle for the heroes. And one of the best examples is Star Wars, because the Death Star quite literally serves as a dragon, much like Smaug or Fafnir. And I'm going to use Smaug more because I think more people are relevantly aware of Smaug
Sure.
because of famous movies. But the Death Star is quite literally a super powerful weapon that can hold the universe or galaxy at risk, can destroy them with a laser beam instead of a dragon breath, what's held kidnapped on the Death Star? Princess Leia. What did dragons eventually evolve to end up kidnapping? Originally, they held resources at bay because that's what we valued as early proto societies. Like water was the most important thing. So early dragons actually stole water and rain. And then it became agricultural stuff. If you look in the myths, dragons stole cattle. That's actually a
Huh.
real thing. There is an evolution where dragons started stealing like livestock and cattle because we needed those to live.
Yeah.
As we grew more into a society of like a more structured kingdoms, we had agriculture and everything into that. What became the wealthiest thing, at least to a king and nobles' minds? A princess. Dragons started kidnapping princesses, and then the plucky hero goes to defeat the dragon, which has one weakness and one chink in its armor. Although it's an exhaust port instead of a broken scale like Smog, and he does. Luke makes the unsinkable shot and he kills the dragon and blows it up and saves the world, or saves the galaxy in this case. And the princess is
Spoilers,
rescued before that.
Ronnie.
Yeah, yeah,
No,
yeah.
just kidding. Just teasing.
But
That's
yeah,
so cool. I love the way you break it down, man. Like I love like seeing these connections is so neat. And like it's kind of the way you put it all together. It's like, well, of course, it's
yeah.
obvious. But like I wouldn't have thought of the
Humanity has
Death
been
Star as a
fanficking each other
dragon, but
forever.
yeah.
This gets into like a really cool myth which Tolkien does so beautifully, and it's the myth of impenetrability. Which, on this case, obviously, I talked about like the myth of impenetrability also comes with the fact that like nothing's truly impenetrable. There's that one chink in the armor, and it goes back to the Achilles myth also, and then South Asian epic that parallels it with the story of Gudrun, who is analogous to Achilles, where they have very similar beats in their story. And in the original real Iliad, Achilles, first of all, never dies. His death is foretold. But he also never is shot to the foot. That actually comes from a piece of Roman unfinished epic poem that follows after. It's kind of like a love letter and fanfic to the Greek, in where Achilles is shot in the foot. In the original, his death is foretold in the original art. He's actually shot through the torso between the gap in his armor. Like where if you had like a brass plate, this part's exposed, he's shot this way. Um, Not there because his mother never dips him in the river Styx in the original either. He was already supposed to be theorized like to be immortal, and his mom wants to test it in some iterations by dipping him in a boiling cauldron. She wants to see, will my baby die if I try?
God
Yeah, I
damn.
know it. But
Thanks,
his
mom.
dad stops that like attempt. But to protect him, his mother Thetis requests from Hephaestus, the god of the smiths and forge, can you make my son something to protect him? And that's why there's that note in the I want to use another again modern pop culture piece, but the Brad Pitt movie where they're like, I hear you can't be hurt, and he's like, I wouldn't be bothering with the armor then, can I? Or would I? And in the original Iliad, there's a lot of detail Homer intentionally puts into describing the armor over and over and over again because it's supposed to be this armor that's impenetrable, made by the gods. Except he does get shot between it, not exactly. And then the same is true of Gudrun, who's also a demigod. He's born, and this is I have a nod to this in Tales of Tremaine, the first book for people who've read it, where the chapter where there's the virginal birth of a god is inspired by this, where Surya in South Asian stories is the sun god, and he gives a boon to Princess Kunti, and she has a virginal birth, Karan, who's sent downriver in a basket, which also precedes the Moses story, a prince going downriver in a basket. But at his birth, he is given a pair of magical earrings and a pair of magical, a piece of magical armor that, as long as he has it on it, it cannot be penetrated. But he ends up giving his armor away, and he's shot in the back and killed in his epic war, which is very similar to the war in the Iliad. There's a lot of similar beats between their character arcs, and these stories also appear in the world nearly at the exact same time. And people still haven't figured out why. Like, were there certain beats that preceded this orally that were traded between the cultures? Because we know there was Indo-Greek trade, there was Indo-Parthian Roman trade. There's been a long history of that. Like a lot of these cultures traded well before we thought that we thought we were supposed to be isolated. But we have records that they traded, they talked. People traveled the world back then. It was just harder, but they did.
Yeah.
There's actually a great record of an Indian sailor who was blown off course traveling westward from India during monsoon season, and he ended up at the mouth of the Red Sea, or the passage up to Alexandria. And Egyptian sailors found him, but at this time it was under Roman control, and they brought him up to talk to the emperor, and he explained to them what India was, how to get there, and then how to navigate the monsoon things, and it created a new oceanic trade route between Egypt and India. And then over by land through Anatolia, they decided to start building an actual roadway, and they actually had like watchtowers along the way to ensure trade because of banditry. But there's actually a history of Indo-Greek kingdoms, one being called Yavana, where they had Indo-Greek coins, and one of the emperors eventually converted to Buddhism. Like these were real empires, and they're just not taught because it's not cool, but they actually existed, and there's records of it. But that means cultural trade, religious trade, which is what inspired the ashram in the first binding was Nalanda, which is a Buddhist university, and it was the world's first residential university where students could go live. And because Buddhism spread across the world, it actually invited and made people from as far as Japan and obviously Greek and Roman philosophers come over to study there because it became like this cool international academy where students from everywhere could just come and debate philosophy. Like most education places at the time, if you had noble or money, you would also learn other skills. Like, you learn archery, swordsmanship, you learn wrestling. There's like the jock pursuits if you want. And then there's the education pursuits of let's talk about math, let's talk about geometry, let's talk about astronomy. Um, and this all just comes from the fact that none of these cultures were really as isolated as we thought. They all traded and talked as much as certain elements allowed them to, whether they were at war at the time or not. But
Sure. That's so cool. Tim said clearly he came at the right time while we started to talk about dragons. Absolutely, Tim.
yeah,
Herman said that the way that Ronnie's mind retains all of this information blows him away every time.
uh,
Herman from the greatest podcast in the
yeah,
multiverse.
yeah, yeah,
Yep,
yeah, yeah. I remember. Yeah,
yep.
for what it's
And
worth, it means I do forget other stuff, and I have to be honest with that. I'm really bad with like certain small details, like on daily life stuff. I do admit that.
I am the same way. Like, well, in that I forget details. I don't have this encyclopedic knowledge of mythology, so that's a bummer. I just get the bad side, where like I even forgot like my daughter's clothes, like her wet clothes from water play at daycare the other day. I just left them there. Picked up my
See,
daughter,
that's a mistake
thankfully.
I would
Didn't for
make.
yeah. Would be
That
worse if
that's
I forgot the daughter.
I hope I don't ever have to. Yeah, I hope I don't have that one ever. With the wet clothes, yeah, that what I would do is because of this. Yes, 100%.
Right, right. Um, so really, I love, man, so much of like what you're talking about. It's so interesting. I think that when remind me of when we talked about four. I think I know that we talked about dragons. Do you remember if we talked about how like so many different cultures have like the flood mythology also?
Maybe, but you are correct. I can't actually see. This is where I don't remember what we talked about it, but I know the myths. So,
Right?
but
Yeah,
yes, there's a lot of flood mythology, and there's a lot more impenetrability mythology too.
I'd love to hear about that. I haven't. Yeah, like the
Oh,
impenetrability mythology is new to me.
so another one that follows what I just talked about with Gudrun and Achilles goes back to Siegfried, the Dragon Slayer. So this is a really cool myth. Not just like the idea that dragons are impenetrable, but because their like dragon scales are so hard. When Siegfried kills Fafnir, he bathes in his blood. And the idea is if you bathe in dragon blood, you get the impenetrability of a dragon. But while
Hmm.
doing it, uh, most commonly it's considered a linden leaf, which is a lime tree leaf, sticks to the small of his back, right? And that one spot doesn't get the dragon blood on it. So that one spot isn't actually impenetrable. But for all intents and purposes, this is a guy with like iron hard dragon skin. But due to some personal struggles between the marriage he has and other suitors, he ends up divulging this secret to the woman he loves, who is then tricked into sharing that secret. So where two men lead him out into the forest, and one of them, if I think if I remember correctly, is with a spear, pierces him through the small of his back in his weak spot, and he's killed. Usually, the impenetrability myth also leads to the fallibility of man, like having that impenetrability like tested to the point where you fall. And we know in the modern myths, like Smaug has that, and they even talk about it in that way. Like the arrow found its mark, and Smaug's like, "What did you say?" Like I'm supposed to be impenetrable. Like he doesn't want anyone to even know. Like how dare someone know that there's a chink in my armor. And another one of this that goes back to the actual myths is obviously we have the myth of Balder with Loki, who ends up killing him. But Freya is really worried about a prophecy of her son's death. So what she does is she takes an oath from everything in the world of nature except mistletoe, which is too young to swear this oath, just so he overlooks it. Loki is aware of this and makes, I think, in some iterations it's an arrow, and or some it's a dart. And the gods have another god, one of their brothers, who is a blind god. And Loki thinks it's hilarious because they're already having a party and a celebration to celebrate Balder's impenetrability, all throwing stuff at them. It's kind of like their drunken fun pastime at this point. Like, hey, one of our brothers can't be hurt. Let's just keep hurling crap at him while we're wasted. And Loki goes to the blind brother, going like, "Hey, throw this dart at him. It's not going to hurt him, right?" It's the one thing that never swore an oath to hurt Balder. So in fact, it does end up killing Balder. Um, and then there is
Whoops.
actually a Caucasus region myth. I cannot pronounce the god's name. I think it's like Sosunsuk or Sosunku. And I actually have it written on Twitter. There's a thread about this for people interested. I can go find
Nice.
the thread, but I don't know how to pronounce it because I've never said it. And he was tempered in fire by a similar god to Hephaestus, the god of this region's forge. And he grabs this other god by tongs, and canonically it's either his thigh or his knee where he's held by the tongs. But
Hmm.
because of that, that part of his body is not tempered, so it's not impenetrable. And similar to Balder, he is struck at his knee or his thigh, which kills him because that one part wasn't tempered in the forge. And there's others. I'm just trying to recall them off the top of my head, but I can't. But the myth of impenetrability is another important one because again, this also goes back to the Death Star. It's impervious, it's the perfect design, but for that one weird weakness, which is why it's such a big thing of we
Right.
found one weakness in the Death Star. This thing's
Right.
supposed to be unbreakable and unkillable, but there is one weakness.
Right.
And that actually comes from a lot of those old epics, and these epics transcend just not one culture. They're like in multiple cultures over time. And it's kind of also the idea, eventually, like the whole idea of a chink of an armor, the chink of the armor. Um, Interestingly enough, like with Fafnir, again, another beat that Tolkien used was after the death of Fafnir. Um, in the originals, Siegfried also finds a piece of golden armor that's also supposed to be just as amazing. After the death of Smaug, Bilbo is rewarded with Mithril, which is just as light and hard as Dragon Scale. He gets like the super magical one piece of armor that's supposed to be protecting you from everything, which of course we see come back as a beautiful nod with Frodo inheriting it. And then he takes the hit that's supposed to kill something, and it's like Frodo's impenetrable. He can't because he has that armor.
Surprise. Yeah. 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 That's really cool. So when you're writing, Ronnie, when you're writing, do you generally you have all this knowledge of mythology? Do you kind of think, hey, I want to make a spin on this? Like, does the mythology come before starting, or like the plan,
Mm-hmm.
or do you sort of be like, no, 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 this is the story I'm writing, and oh, hey, yeah, there's this thing from mythology, and I can sort of pull from, or is it a combination of the two?
It's a for my overall career, it's a combination. For Tales of Tremaine specifically, there's a lot more mythology coming first. And
Yeah,
I recently wrote an article about this, like why I chose the candle, cloak, and cane symbolically, because in mythology and our epics, historically, some iteration of them have actually been really important tools to us for humanity, and there's a psychology with that. And because this is a love letter to both um, modern contemporary fiction and the history of fiction, and then also as well as mythology and culture for all of us, and the shared similarities. Like this is supposed to be love letter to us as people. The shared aspects that make us all that rather than divisive, because storytelling has been one of the things that historically has united us to the point where why there's so many similarities because people love and tell them. The candle, cloak, and cane have historic, or the walking stick or the wizard staff, because it serves as all three, which is what I talk about. And in the first binding, it's interchangeably intentionally used that way. Um, these have been three magical items that I chose a more reductionist aspect of them because they don't have to be just one. But the candle represents the magical light source, and it also represents the idea of fire in man's hand or in man's grasp and ability to manipulate. Which again goes back to the fire theft, the inheritance of that. The use of fire in man's hand allows man to get closer to the gods, which is why the gods did not want us to have fire. Um, and the cloak was also the original like leather jacket for coolness sake, but it was also the original armor piece. There's like entire myths. The cloak of invisibility did not start with Harry Potter. There are numerous myths of invisibility cloaks.
right.
There are ideas of cloaks that would stop you from drowning and floating, cloaks that would turn you into a swan, cloaks that let you fly, cloaks of impenetrability, cloaks that would do so many wondrous things, shape shifting. I can't even remember because we're talking there are hundreds of iterations over these myths, and I
Sure.
do mean hundreds. And same with the traveler's walking stick. There is a functionality to it. It is also a club and a weapon, but it also wise men used to act like wise men and wizards would have the walking stick, and it was also the foci, the magical tool. The Dag Damor had one, who was a Celtic legend, also similar to Wise Man, a druid. Um, and then we know Western wizards, more in the European contemporary sense, had the wizard staff. And it is a tool of magic, and it is ingrained in us representatively to see it in that light. Moses had the magic stick, right? So when I chose the tools, those were mythologically chosen because I do believe, as humans, there's something beautiful about our shared history and mythology, and I wanted to evoke that sense because even though Tales of Tremaine is through a South Asian lens, it is a commentary, a meta commentary, and meta referential story about humans, and that's why I also wanted to use the Silk Road because it lets me tackle so many more cultures to hopefully have those people and their cultures represented, even in a secondary sense, and a love letter to a lot more than just one culture, and a love letter to a lot more just people. Um, because that's a very personal thing of me, and that's probably indicative of like when I write the forewords in the books or the acknowledgments of just who I am and my Twitter feed because I'm not really happy with increased hate through social media and divisiveness and everything that's going on. And storytelling is one of the avenues that can at least address this because that's something I do, right? I can't solve the world's problems, but I can at least write something hopefully entertaining. I do a commentary on it about how we're all the same,
Yeah.
and show that through stories quite literally in this sense because that's something I personally study and love. So like, if I could do the commentary, I'll do it about storytelling.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree with you. Yeah, we're so much more alike than we are different, and we
Mm-hmm.
forget that all the time. I almost wish, like, we'll take this to a sci-fi realm for a second. I sort of wish, like, we could have some knowledge of aliens, just so that we could be like, look how wildly different they are from any, like, put
And it
two of
unites
them.
us. Yes.
Exactly,
Because
exactly.
historically, that is what happens when aliens attack. Humanity gets together, going like, "We've got bigger problems. We're all the same."
I
And
don't
you
even
get
feel
Star
like,
Trek.
I wonder, like, I mean, do you think there would be like a big uniting force if they didn't attack? Because I bet there would be, obviously not to the same degree, but I think there would be like some uniting force where it's like, oh wait, we all are all human, and like,
Hmm.
and there are people that are wildly different, like this completely different like
I hope
culture
even if
and
they
what.
didn't attack, that's what would happen.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, this is a terrifying theory. Sort of alluded to by Cixin Liu, but he also the Dark Forest theory is way more complex than that. But I always like the reductionist take of if they're aliens and they're that advanced, why would they bother coming to us unless
Oh
they
yeah,
need
for
something
sure.
from us, which is resources. Like they wouldn't even care about us. It's like maybe Earth has a natural mineral resource that's important to them.
Yeah.
And I don't like that take because I tried. Again, I'm all for like us unity and hopefully not having to fight aliens. But then again, I'm also a dude from the '90s, so like who hasn't had the alien fighting dream? Like that's the one thing we all like go to bed with, right? Like
Right,
it's
sure,
like I
sure.
played Halo. I'm ready to fight. Like that's the one thing. It's like I'm signing up. I'll fight aliens. Sorry, I've been prepping for this my whole life, and now HellDivers too, right? Like sorry, aliens. Like all our problems go away if you show up. That's the
But
one mistake you'll make. You come to Earth. Like we'll fix all of our crap yesterday to fight you today.
absolutely true. Absolutely true. Bo says maybe aliens are walking around us already. In fact, maybe Ronnie is an alien and that's why he knows so much mythology. Huh?
No, no. I would be a very bad alien. I would not be able to keep that secret. If I was.
Right.
I'd just
That's
be
funny.
talking about alien mythology and the alien technology too. I wouldn't be able to help myself because it would be so cool.
Yeah, fair. I would I
Yeah.
would I would do the same. I would do the same. Yeah.
Or I'd
Yeah.
convert because you guys have muscle cars, right? Like that would be my argument. It's like Earthlings have muscle cars, and I like them. They go for
that that's the resource that aliens would come to take. They're like,
yes,
no, no, no,
yes.
we
They're
need a
coming to
Shelby
steal our
Cobra.
classic muscle. Yes, exactly.
Right? Right? Like, you guys are fucking idiots. But one thing you did right.
Yes, yes. It takes gasoline and goes vroom. We
Vroom.
like.
Yeah, 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 yeah. That'd be so funny. I talked with an actual astrophysicist who's also an author
Ooh,
on my show, and she's also a professor of astrobiology. And I was like,
whoa,
let's get into this. It was super fun. Her take
really
was
smart
that,
people.
right, her take was, she chooses to be optimistic about it, and yes, like, agree that, yeah, if they're out there and they are incredibly advanced, then they probably wouldn't care about us, and and like her like chosen belief, the thing that she wants to hold on to, is that, there's a little bit of like unity, sort of something along the lines of like a Star Trek Federation, and they're like, we humans are just not ready yet.
Yeah, that I can agree with. I think like I really do believe and hope we get there one day.
Yeah.
As much as I actually am gonna get in so much trouble maybe because SFF fandom can be very divisive. As much as I love Star Wars and it's my favorite SF universe for the most part in terms of the large multimedia universes
Nice.
that have transcended just like being small time and localized fandom.
Uh-huh.
I like the idea of Star Trek more for our world and reality.
Yeah.
Like I want us to end up in Star Trek, not Star Wars, but I
Yeah,
like Star
right.
Wars because Star Wars has laser swords and the Force.
Right. Yeah. Yeah,
But I
Jedi
do not
and
want.
lightsabers are pretty badass, but
Yes,
like,
yes, but I don't
you
want a
know,
universe where like if you don't live in like the one nice planet, it's hut territory outside in the outer rim, and it's all galactic lawlessness. I would much rather have like Star Trek. We cured everything. Like everyone has a replicator, everyone can eat, and anyone can have a muscle car because there's no need to have one. So if you just want one, you can replicate the parts and have it. Cool. Like do what
right,
you want, just don't hurt people. It's like they figured everything out.
right, right,
Replicate
right.
your
No,
food, do whatever you want. You don't need to have a job, but like most people do want to have one. So you go work like for chair. You do whatever you want genuinely. But and like
completely.
they actually did it. People can just I want to paint all day, but I have my food and everything. You're a productive member of society in some way because you're making art. Like
Yep.
I just thought that was cool. I really love that, and I think it was a very, especially at the time it debuted, it was a beautifully optimistic and forward thinking piece that I think that's why it still resonates, and I really hope we go towards Star Trek. Maybe
And
Star Trek can
so
have laser swords though. Just saying.
I completely agree. I mean, maybe I need to go like check out some of the new Star Trek shows, but I feel like they've like a little bit lost some of that. Like, the last
Oh,
Star Trek movie I saw was one where like Chris Pine was the captain, and they played Beastie Boys while a bunch of like aliens were getting destroyed.
I think I vaguely remember that. That was like years ago. I think that was before even Endgame, right? Or was it right after? No, it was before
Actually, it
Endgame.
might have been, yeah, before Endgame. And don't get me
Yeah,
wrong, like, it was fun,
fun.
but like it didn't have the same like cultural message, at all.
I could see that point. Yeah, it kind of like took it for fun for killing aliens, whereas like it always seems like historically in Star Trek, because of the idea of the phaser where you can set it to stun, you
Right,
don't have to do that unless it's the absolute last resort, and then you kind of
right,
regret having to do that. Yeah, I can
right.
see that argument 100%.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, yeah, they're like, philosophical questions that are posed in like Star Trek: The Next Generation, and this was just like, oh, aliens bad, like, which again, like, I mean, don't get me wrong, that can be super fun. Like, I mean, how great is the movie Independence Day? Still, right? But
Aliens bad.
aliens bad, yeah. They came like, so we're gonna give them
They
computer
started it.
viruses and nuke them. Like,
Yes,
great. That's like, fucking give me popcorn. I'm ready for it, But
absolutely. I still love that. That's how simple it was. USB port up to virus to a whole nother level of technology tech tree. Just yep, yeah, computer
right,
virus.
yeah, yeah, no, yeah, totally works. Totally
Yep.
makes perfect sense. um, um, oh, I just had
Also,
yeah. Oh,
remember
oh, oh, oh,
Will
oh, oh,
Smith's
oh.
answer to that was just to punch it in the face, which is a very American answer, but it works.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Punch an alien in the face.
Welcome
I'm
to
gonna come off
Earth.
so xenophobic now.
Right, right, right. That's
Aliens are gonna cancel me.
funny. It's coming. Um, um, have you read or heard of have you read the series Dungeon Crawler Carl?
No, but I actually do know Matt Dinneman. So
Nice.
that makes it more awkward. But he's a super sweetheart. He understands. We met 2 years ago at Jordan Con or last year. But no, we actually met 2 years, 3 years, 2 3 years ago at Dragon Con, not Jordan Con, because we played D&D together for a charity thing.
Oh,
Actually, so
cool.
yeah, that was the first time I actually met him. Was we were playing D&D for charity, and then I saw him again at Jordan Con. I am aware of Dungeon Crawler Call. I've just not read it.
Yeah, yeah, not fair.
Sorry.
It's been my read lately, and that one is kind of going the other direction, where like it starts out with just like silly fun, blowing up, and ridiculousness, but like as it's going, there's way more like kind of social commentary and like emotional elements with actual character development, really meaningful character development, not just like he got more stats now he blows up shit
Mhm.
more good. Which like I'm like, man, what, like, Dinneman, like, how are you
Mhm.
doing this? Well done. Like, it's impressive. But
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, so okay, well, mythology. I'm gonna talk a little bit more about mythology. One of the things that I'm doing in my writing is I'm like just stealing some mythological creatures, mostly because
Hmm.
it takes a lot less effort than making my own creatures. You know?
Yeah, they call that the urban fantasy genre, and I get to say that because I wrote urban fantasy. But yes, yeah, yep,
Right,
yeah,
right.
right.
Um, uh, are there any like sort of I don't know. Is there a particular monster that's your favorite? I mean, dragons are kind of a go-to, right? But like, is there? I'm trying to get like a little bit more unknown. I've got like omets in there.
Hmm.
I using one thing that like kind of the scorpion human sort of centaur mix, sort of like Scorpion King from the Mummy movies back in the day.
Hmm. Like a manticore.
Yeah, well, I guess like a manticore has part like serpent and lion and goat, I guess, with some manticore definitions, right?
Or some
This
chimera, yeah.
okay, no, yeah, that's all right. My bad. Yeah, yeah. See, like, so I had in my mind this. I thought this like scorpion thing was actually called an acrobamel, and I'm like, I went and looked it again, and I'm like, did I make up that word? I thought
If
that
you did, you should run with it. You
was
also
a
know
good
how a
word.
lot of fantasy works, or what's become really common is to find like an old English archaic version. If you're using like a Western creature, I've seen some fantasy authors come up with something and it seems like it's very like unique, and then you look it up and you're like, oh, it's the old archaic version of what that word would have been. It's like okay, like still props for using and doing that, but like it was a word.
Word.
Welcome to being part of an author.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right. Yeah. True. Um, Yeah, but it's fun. I like being able to kind of just grab it, especially because my stuff is like science fantasy, and I'm like, you know what, mythological creatures, science fantasy. Yes, we're
Hmm.
doing it. It's gonna be fun.
There you go. There you go.
Um,
Like a part of writing is like it's fun. You're supposed to be fun, and there's a level of self indulgence as long as you don't let it distract from the point of your story, right? Because then you're just
right.
like masturbating, which is like not what you're supposed to do. And as much as I love Tolkien, that is what he did. But at that time, right, there wasn't really anyone else doing it. There wasn't rules, and he was very much writing in the epic mythic sense. So
Yeah,
like it sort of does justify him going on for pages and pages and pages about a babbling brook. Like he is quite literally painting a scene at a time where nobody is. Like wasn't an epic fantasy tradition at that point. It was all mythic and epic poems, And then there was some early fantasy, and it wasn't mythic. I think I did talk to you about this or somebody. Let in the Mists by Hope Mirrorless, which was
Hmm.
actually the fantasy before Tolkien, which people don't know about. She's actually one of the earliest fantasy authors. She should get more credit. She was writing about fae and human. It's a very beautiful story. She kind of don't want to spoil it, but you should look it up if you're into classic, very old fantasy and you want to see some hidden gems you missed. Let in the Mist by Hope Mirrorless. I hope I said her name right because I never actually heard it loud, but it's spelled that way. Yeah, and before him, the largest authors, like you have Mary Shelley and you have a lot of the
Hmm.
early sci-fi
Hmm.
tradition. There wasn't really the epic mythic, and then even Tolkien didn't blow up until the hilarious story of how the paperback came to America, because it was kind of the rights were just stolen.
Oh, really?
They
I
weren't
didn't
they
know
weren't paid
that.
for because a publisher approached him about that because it was only in hardcover and it was kind of like a cult hit. And then I can't remember what publisher it was. Was it Daw or Ace or somebody just went like, well, they didn't have like whatever the international laws were like codified. You should look up the story because it is true. It's hilarious. They
Wow.
just went like, all right, we'll just start publishing the paperback here, and it took off, right? Because it was super accessible and interesting. Like got a second win. Lord of the Rings was like the biggest thing in the world, and then I don't know if they sued or how they got the rights back, but they did. And a different publisher ended up having it. But it's a hilarious story,
I had to
and
write that down.
the
Yeah, I'm
tradition
definitely.
of epic fantasy getting more codified. It's why Terry Brooks, and this is a random tangent, but like with mythology, I love the literature history
Yes. Yes.
of especially genre fiction. Terry Brooks is the first fantasy author who got on the New York Times. So because of him, fantasy
Oh,
literature got
really?
taken more seriously. But yeah, and it's why he should get more credit. I know people bag on the first Shannara book, and I have to force myself to say it that way. I heard him correct somebody, and it is Shannara, not Shannara, and I still say Shannara, and I don't want him to stab me in my sleep one day. Just wake up and he's standing there like it's Shannara.
Shit,
Um,
you
but yeah,
son of a.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's like one of the earliest like fantasy authors to get on New York Times,
Wow.
and that kind of changed it because there was a period where SFF was considered like ghetto, like it was like just a shitty place to be writing books in like the '60s or '70s, and it was just like yeah, you're not
Hmm.
a real writer, you're like a scrub,
Wow.
and Shannara changed stuff for genre fiction forever. Without that, we would probably not be hitting lists. We probably would still not be taken seriously. Because at the end of the day, sales metrics are sales metrics, and if you hit a lot of sales, sales are king.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can't talk crap to somebody who's outselling a lot of other like maybe whatever the hoity-toity of that era was. I don't want to besmirch on the genre, so I'll just cast like whatever people,
Yep.
the associated people with that were saying was like this is real literature. Like you got someone like him coming out and absolutely like wrecking and hitting the list. You need to start taking it seriously,
Right.
or it's like an easier way to at least make the argument like, hey, please take this seriously.
Sort of a. Well, Herman and Joe Rixman is in the chat. Hey, Joe, and both
Hey
of
guys,
them are like, man, Shanaro was my gateway into fantasy. They're, you know, they're
yeah.
fans also. I'm just wondering too, like, how many people now are their gateway into fantasy today is Fourth Wing,
Hmm,
or
I could see that.
A Court of Thorns and Roses, and all this
Yeah,
romantasy.
yeah. Romantasy became the gateway for a lot to transition, especially from romance to fantasy. And I actually think it's going to serve as a bridge where more people who started that might end up feeling they like fantasy more. I don't know. I'm not painting with a wide brush there. I think
Yeah,
it's just inevitable with any large group of people. Some might go, you know what? I do like these fantastical elements more. Let me see what's more on the just overall fantasy side. It doesn't mean they'll stop romance or even romantasy, but I
right.
but I think there will be more. I just think it's an interesting time. I don't know
Yeah.
what's going to come of it. I've only seen the industry effects of romantasy.
Yeah, right. Who nobody has a crystal ball, but I agree with you. I think like I imagine that things will work that way. I was talking with another author, Ro Bushy, a while ago, and he's been to a lot of cons. I've been to a fair number of like Comic Cons back in the day, but not too many like bookish cons, right? You've been to like a good number of bookish cons, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's weird because the bookish cons I've done are still more Comic Con oriented, but they're not pop culture cons. And to break that down, Dragon Con or New York Comic Con are actually pop culture cons at this point,
Right,
right?
right, yeah,
But I
yeah.
do one called Raven Con, which, given the name Raven, it is associated and inspired by Edgar Allan Poe. It is a very predominantly literature con, but it's not a
Nice.
book con the way you might have a book festival. Like it's not massive. It is very
Sure.
small. It's very intimate, but everyone there's a reader, and it's clearly for authors and book buyers. Like the dealer hall is almost all. It's just all books. Like, and it's
Nice.
like vintage books too, which is really interesting. There's like vintage book collectors like, do you want a first edition of Earthsea there? And you're like, what? Like that was like 1940s. I'm like, what? How old is that? Like it was just really cool. But yes, I've done a small amount of just book oriented cons.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, so Ro's been to like I guess more of the pop culture cons, but still like
Mhm,
with at least some book elements. Like
mhm,
you know, the MegaCon in Orlando I used to go to every year, and
mhm,
there were I don't remember there being like hardly any authors, you know, but there are
mhm,
tons of like comic books, lots of cosplay, that sort of
mhm,
anyway.
mhm.
But Ro, he was telling me that like the people that approach him and talk about fantasy books were often women at the cons,
Yes,
and like
yes. At
to
this
me
point,
that
actually, more women
like
read fantasy than women make up the largest fantasy demographic at this point in time. There's actually data and studies about that, and I think a lot of that also has to do with, sadly, historically, for decades, like women were issued and kicked out of these spaces, were not welcome in these spaces, and now they've got a lot more agency. They're finding their way into it. Just like, let's take gaming for example, which has
yeah
historically been very toxic, unfortunately, to women, and now some of the biggest streamers are paving way for women, and it's become a more inclusive space. I think there's still work to do.
yeah
Comics is the same way. But yeah, right now there are more women reading in fantasy. I can't speak for overall full
sure.
speculative fiction and genre because I've only ever seen actually the data for fantasy. But yeah, yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, well, I mean, it does me, and I don't want to like. I'm not trying to like discredit say anything negative of women. I think it's
Oh,
absolutely awesome, absolutely awesome. I just like my perception is like it was dudes that were into like Lord of the Rings. You know what I mean?
oh yeah,
Like
I can completely see that too. Yeah, growing up, but
yeah,
it just the
yeah.
anecdote on that in my particular high school, the biggest Lord of the Rings fan was a small girl, and I actually still remember her name, Becca, and she would wear the cloak of Lothlorien
That's
with the
amazing.
actual clasp, and
Yeah,
she would wear it
yeah,
in high school as much as she often could. If you ever see this, Becca, like, hi, I actually still remember you. We weren't friends with her. We barely even talked. We just had classes together. But I
yeah.
remember Lord of the Rings was her favorite thing in the world because she had the cloak. She always wore it as often as she could.
Becca, you're an awesome nerd. I want to be friends. That's so cool.
That is weird
Um,
that I actually remember that. But yeah, it was just such a striking thing because nobody did that. Like, even though I was a fantasy fan, I never wore fantasy anything. I never brought anything fantasy to school. It was just like something I kept compartmentalized at home.
yep, yep, yep. I hear you. All right, so let's shift gears a little bit. Mythology, we shift gears because I want to talk to you a little bit about cars and maybe other stuff. You know, like you know, we talked about mythology being an inspiration, but I know that you have lots of various interests and talents and whatnot, sir. So, what are other things that you draw on in your writing? With some, you know, maybe you know, either some early stories or lately. What's been sort of fun things that you're like, oh, this gets me literally amped up to like write about this?
Weaponsmithing because I'm a huge fan. I do watch and read a lot about it. I haven't had the chance or time to set up a forge and do that. And
That's
I
cool.
actually at one point was thinking about it because there's a lot of cool forges you can buy on Etsy for knives, which are like $200 already built,
Oh
small like
wow,
propane tank, everything, right? It just lets you build a knife. It's about all
sure.
the only billet you can fit in it. And I was talking about it on Twitter, and someone was like, "Please don't." And then 10 other people came in, and I was already a writer at this point, and they're like, "Yeah, please don't." I was like, "Why?" And every single one of them was like, "Oh, my boyfriend, my ex, somebody who did it completely gave up everything else they were doing in life, and that's all they do. And they all try to go full time with it. And they're like, we would like you to write more books. And I was like, is it really that addicting? And every one of them had like an Etsy page for like their knives. And I was like, oh wow, this really did become the hobby took them over. But I do
Wow.
love the idea of classic weaponsmithing. It's
Yeah.
something I'm really passionate about because I've talked about hints of it in Tales of Tremaine. Book two actually does get into the
Nice.
idea of a special alloy and a special weapon. I don't want to spoil stuff, but it gets more into it because going back to mythology and symbolism, like with the candle cloak and cane, the sword historically has a lot of alchemical, magical storiness to it. Because if you look at the history of forging a sword, it incorporates all the elements. So it is a magical process. And it was thought to be that in many ways. Like blacksmiths and metalsmiths were some of the earliest, wealthiest people, especially when gold was first discovered, because it's a hard metal to work with. It's very soft and malleable and it melts really easy. Um, so people who were able to mine and smith it became very wealthy early on. But the sword is quite literally lump and earth, right? You have to take and purify. Let's start with iron, and then eventually get to steel. But you have to melt and purify that down. So that's an element of the earth with fire, and you're pumping bellows, which is air, into it. You are sacrificing some blood, sweat, and tears as well. And then you quench it with water and oil, right? That if you're going by the four traditional elements to make a sword, you use all four elements to do that. It is the culmination of all of them into a personal handheld tool for man to do whatever with. And obviously, in this case, let's just say use war, not even make the self defense argument. But the sword is quite literally the culmination of that. And historically, we have it associated with very great mythic heroes, leaders. Like if you're a peasant in an army, you don't get a sword; you get a pike or a spear. Like
Right.
a knight gets a sword, a leader gets a sword, a cavalry leader has a saber, right? Like you get the sword, an officer gets a sword. It is symbolically now become associated everything from the royal to like someone in charge, a hero, a protagonist gets a sword. Everyone gets a cool sword in fantasy because I think of that psychology inherent. Jon Snow gets a cool sword. Like think Luke Skywalker gets a laser sword.
Super
But it has
cool.
always been an element. It has always been associated with the elements psychologically, and even the lightsaber is associated with an element, just a magical one. It's the Force.
Yeah.
Only people with the Force can wield lightsaber, and the idea being you'll probably cut your hand off, like or whatever, because that argument was made, I think, in the Young Jedi Knight books with Tenno Ka. But I can't remember if she cuts hers off or like it blows up because she loses like part of her arm. I just don't remember how it happens. Yeah, we went off sidetrack, but yes, oh, that's one
No,
of the
no, no, no,
hobbies.
no.
I
Like
don't know what else you
I'm
want to know, but
laughing
like,
because of Bo in the chat because he's got a good one. That actually brings it back. Go
but
ahead.
music is obviously one of them because I've got one of my guitars up there. It's just the
Ooh,
safest place I can keep it in my room.
nice.
But I do love guitar and piano. Traditionally, those are the two instruments I held the greatest affinity for.
Piano.
I
If I could, if I've like told my wife this for years before. If I could like, wave a magic wand and wake up tomorrow and have a talent, it wouldn't be a better writer or whatever. It would be play piano. Like
piano.
I do not
I
have
actually can't.
the
Yeah,
patience
I
to
agree with
learn
that.
it. Yeah, yeah. But like it's such a great instrument in like it's
Yes,
so versatile. You could play
it is.
anything from like
You
from freaking Crocodile Rock to Chopin. You know what I mean? Like
the piano is I would actually say it's like the king of instruments. Like as much as like I'm way more proficient with guitar, I'm not that great at piano. Um, I love piano more, but I'm in the
yeah.
same place. I don't have the time and patience for it, but that is
Yeah.
an instrument I genuinely love, and I genuinely do love music, and I love the history of instruments more, which sounds weird. I love what music has also been in history, if that makes sense. Like I do listen to music. I am a music buff, not to the degree that my friends are. Like my best friend, my oldest friend, is like literally the biggest music buff in the world. But I like the history of the art of music. Like I specifically study, like for example, Eminem's use of syncopation in his rhyme schemes. I love the art that goes into music and singing, the history of the evolution of instruments, the travel of them, the use of them in storytelling. Um, and then I'm guessing that this question about like the talents and desires obviously is going to lead to the car stuff, which that's probably my biggest passion that I've recently renewed because I did unfortunately fall out of the car scene through job stuff and then life with writing and time and money, and I'm sort of getting back into it. But for the longest time in my life, I was a mechanic, pursuing and getting like ASE certifications, which are part of the Society of Automotive Engineers. It's like it's just like you have your CCNA or computer certs. They're those for automotive, and you would have like your A1 through A8, and those would be like brakes, cooling systems, transmission, and then you have like the L series and like the L1 advanced engines. And then I also had like my emissions inspection for the DEQ, Department of Environmental Quality and State Safety, which for everybody, I actually didn't get my inspection today for that. That's like your brakes, your horn works, you don't have an exhaust leak, airbag, seatbelt safety check essentially. Brakes are up to snuff, which I still weirdly remember. Like I think everyone in the United States has to be above 230 seconds, which is the measuring for brakes in the tire tread. But yeah, cars is the biggest. I'm just talking. I'll let you ask questions.
No, 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 no. That's yeah, yeah. That's cool. That's cool. That's yeah. And to that point,
Mhm.
Bo in chat, and this was had me kind of laughing like a minute ago. This is a fun question. If Nithim was a car, what would they be?
Oh God, I would pick a car I hate. So he'd probably be like a Ford Pinto or a Pontiac Fiero, um, or maybe some over bloated horrible Buick because like he does have a wealthy background and like the veneer of wealth, but he's also a piece of shit. Um,
You know what I
oh,
saw
you know
the
what he would be a '70s Cadillac. I don't care how nice they were. They were big, over bloated, and super slow. Like those things were made to turn money into fuel that turned into nothing. I don't know how those things moved, to be honest, with like a 7-liter engine that produced 150. Like I know why the engines produce so little horsepower because the emission regulations. I still don't know how they moved with only 150 horsepower with how big they were.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
that is a miracle.
right. I saw the craziest thing the other day that you'll appreciate. That's in the same vein. Someone had a in the front, like the grill and whatnot, was a Rolls, but this Rolls was heavily modified to be much extended in the hood because it fit an entire the Rolls Royce engine from a Spitfire from World War II inside.
100 all for that. I love that. That is
Right?
fucking great.
It was
Oh my god, a
like
monster
it
fucking.
has a whole like book just to start the engine because it's a process. it was good. I'll have to find that link and I'll send it because there's like a little
Oh,
short
absolutely.
video of it.
I love that. I love monster things. I recently saw someone take an old 34 Ford Coupe, and the weird thing they did was they put a Honda motor in it, which seems blasphemous, but it's a high-tuned Honda motor. I think it was almost like a F1 inspired motor. So this
Mm,
thing just rips. It's extremely high RPM. It sounds like an F1 car, but he turned it into like a mix of a dragster with F1 kind of body styling cues. So the spoiler it has, it doesn't have like the Japanese JDM style spoiler. It looks like a very F1 like rectangular spoiler for the
mm,
downforce. And he
mhm.
modified its body, so it's still very clearly like an old Ford. It looks like if they had almost done a futuristic racing Ford at that time.
What a
It's just
weird.
very odd, but it's
Yeah.
beautifully striking to see because it is just also matte black. So look, it's kind of still fits like the classic look. It's a very solid color. It's
Mm,
not garish to look at, and when
yeah.
you hear the motor, and you're like, that's not a V8. That's not an old school inline six. Like
Yeah.
you could tell, like
What
that's
is
a really
that?
high revving motor.
Right.
But it makes it stand out, and it was just a cool blend because I haven't seen that much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I'm the other way. If I ever get an old classic Japanese car, like let's say I get an old Datsun, I'm finding like a 392 short block Hemi out of like a junkyard Dodge Ram because it's the same block as the Challenger. I'm like, I'm
Sure.
cramming that in there, and we're gonna start with like 470 horsepower stock, and then we're gonna go crazy from there.
Good
Like we're
times.
gonna
Good times.
show these JDM cars what American muscle means. I grew
Spoken
up in
like a
Virginia, right? So
Toretto.
yes, yeah, yeah. Like I grew up around like the guy across the street from me, where I grew up was a Korean War vet who had a Cutlass 442 um, convertible. So like I grew up around a lot of classic old American muscle cars.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I definitely have an affinity for them as well as their motors, obviously. Not
Nice.
from the 70s or 80s again, where they made no horsepower. Just like the 60s and then mid 90s, starting back up when like the Mustangs had the 4.6 liter 281 cubic inch V8, the modular, and then at that time the LS1 came out, which is like what every hot rodder's famous motor because the whole joke is can it fit an LS1 in it? Like anyone who ever gets a car and you don't have a motor, especially like a Miata, can you shove a big American V8 in it that with one cam just sounds like a drag car? And how much horsepower can you get out of that old Corvette motor? It's like the number one popular motor for that, and it costs nothing. You could find one at a junkyard for like a couple $100.
Oh, nice. Nice. Okay. So Bo asked kind of the same question. If if but different character. So if Ari was a car, what would Ari be?
Lamborghini Countach because protagonist energy, but also prone to catching on fire or exploding.
I love how quick with that you were. You knew,
I
like
knew, yeah.
not even a Lamborghini Countach.
Yes, looks very cool. It will catch fire
I gotta
or
go.
start a fire. Yeah,
All right.
100%, which is what he is responsible for in the books.
Is that?
It's
Ooh.
Cuntach.
It auto completed for me. I'm good. Wait. Oh yeah, this is.
There's a new one
Oh no,
coming
this
out.
is one of the
Lamborghini.
models that they've had for a while, like in different versions. Yeah.
Yeah. But Lamborghini's actually bringing that back. There's a new Countach coming out.
Right.
They're reviving that brand, and I think I saw a concept of it. I don't know if that's the official. I haven't looked too much into it. I just saw like some of the trending news about it, which will be really interesting because it's a legendary car. That was one of the coolest cars in the 80s anybody could have. It was all 80s posters because it was that and then the Ferrari of the time, which was the Miami Vice Ferrari. It's like you either dreamed of that or you dreamed of the Countach. Like and I'm not an 80s kid, but like knowing car history and I knew people who were. Those are the two cars if you wanted a supercar. It was
Yeah.
I forget. I think it was a Ferrari Testarossa, or
Right.
it was like you either wanted that or you wanted the Countach. Every teenager boy in America had that one of those posters on their wall.
Yep. 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 That's hot. Yeah.
Like, well, literally, yeah, those cars caught fire. Like they really did.
As you know, these things happen. It's fine.
It's why Lamborghini got better after Audi bought them. Unfortunately, like
Oh.
Italian styling, German engineering, including with the electrics. Now everything works. Italians get to do the styling and make the engine for the horsepower and the noise and the fast, and the Germans go, "We're gonna make sure everything works in this car. No more exploding, no more catching fire."
We're gonna make sure you don't catch fire.
Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, I want to spend a little time talking about one other thing, and catching fire is actually a really good segue. HellDivers, my friend.
Okay,
Dude,
yeah,
how much
100%.
HellDivers have you been playing?
Oh God, that's a bad question. It's a great question. It's just I have a bad answer. Unfortunately, a lot
Too
more than I.
much, right? Right.
Well, I also get frustrated because like there's so many issues with the game, and I still play it. And then like
Yeah.
my favorite author plays it, and I get to play with him. So like it's
Oh, nice.
it's hard not to say no, right? Like
Right.
I actually logged off yesterday, and I got an invite from him, and it was like, and it just said democracy, and I was like, F yeah, yeah, I'm getting back on. I was like, yep, I'm getting back on. Just like
Democracy,
getting back
of course,
on.
democracy. Yeah,
So
you
like,
know,
yeah,
yeah,
and then I
right, right.
stayed on until like 11:40 playing. And I was like, I shouldn't be reading right now and
Yeah,
studying.
yeah, I should. Yeah,
Like
I hear
I
you.
should, but I got so dumped into it, and then running hell dive missions,
Yep.
and dying in ridiculous ways. And ironically, fire, I do have I like fire builds, so I have incendiary impact grenades and the flamethrower and napalm strikes right now because we're fighting bugs, and
Yep.
you've
Yep.
got to burn all the bugs, and that's literally the mission right now. It's like kill
A
1 billion
billion.
terminids, and I was like, yeah, doing my part,
Doing my part. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
doing my
Same, same,
part.
same. I
I'm
like
doing
fighting
my
the
part.
I like fighting the bots a little bit more, but bugs are pretty satisfying too. You know, yeah, you drop the napalm strike and you get like 30 kills, and you're like,
Yep, yep,
ah,
yep, yep. Especially like on one of their breaches, that or the extremely underrated the gas strike on bugs
right,
because it's
yes,
so
yes.
localized and it's such a fast cooldown, and they
Mm-hmm.
just come out that stacked with fire. Oh my god, you're just murdering them. And I really fell in love with the Gatling barrage. I
Oh
didn't
yeah,
think
yeah.
that was good,
Since they
but I
upgraded
didn't
it,
realize because it's explosive that hurts all heavies. It's explosive damage, so it actually will hurt and kill a Bio Titan or a Charger, and it comes back every 70 seconds, so stacked with other stuff. But I started running on the higher difficulties. I became like the official heavy killer, or unofficially because no one votes me in. But like, so I started running like rail cannon strike, orbital laser to also clear objectives, and then I'll have like if I have a weapon, it'll be the spear, the commando, something that takes out a heavy and tracks. If I don't have one, I will have two things for small things. Like I'll have Gatling barrage to like kill some heavies or hurt them in minis. I'm trying to think what else will I bring. Autocannon turret because it does way more damage than the portable. But I hate how weak they are. That's one of my frustrations actually. Like a
yeah,
bug looks at a turret and they're gone. I don't
right.
get that. Like they need to be buffed.
Yeah, yeah.
That
And the
or
charger's just like, cool, shoot at me. I'm gonna go eat you. Yeah, they don't
yeah,
care about the
and
auto
I
cannon turret.
hate that.
Yeah,
Please buff turrets. Or
yeah.
what's the last thing? What's the other one I really bring? Because I do have a bunch of builds. Like oh yeah, normal eagle strike because they're as much as I love napalm. If I need to kill a couple heavies and I'm out of everything, like they cool down
Yeah.
so fast, and
Yeah.
enough of them will kill most heavies.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I didn't think about that. I
That's
haven't
the
really.
bug build. Like my
Yeah.
bot build is completely different.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well.
I
Yeah.
am a huge fan of abusing the ballistic shield with the pummeler because that thing just blocks everything. You can walk when
Nice.
it first came out. You could walk right up to the factory striders that are really just they are literally AT-AT walkers for anyone who plays. They
Yeah.
literally went tracing paper over that from Star Wars and like, put them in here, but now they can drop robots. But you
Yeah.
can walk up to it and it's two mini turrets under its chin. Can't shoot through the ballistic shield, so you can just like walk up to it, and just keep shooting it in the face, like point blank at this giant mech, and like just blow its little turrets off, and then get underneath it because
Yeah.
I still don't know how many players know, but like where it drops the bots, it's weak
Yeah.
point.
As the weak spot. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
you just go sit there and just shoot it. And, like it's so broken, it takes up a slot for the ballistic shield, but like I love it. And then I'll just bring
The
auto
commando.
cannon turret. I will bring the commando if I have to, just because it does one shot the thing, but it's so
The
bad for
fabricator.
hitting the if you have gunships. I
Oh, I
hate them.
know. Yeah.
I
Yeah. Yeah.
hate
Yeah.
them. But the one weird thing is that the autocannon turret on them, it doesn't miss. That thing
Oh,
just
yeah.
boom, just one shots all of them or two shots. So I leave
Okay.
that if I go to blow up one of their bases, because I'll
Yeah.
throw that down while I'm
Yeah.
calling
Those
down the
stupid
hellbomb.
gunship factories are so annoying. Oh my
They're
god.
so annoying.
Yeah.
Just taking them out tonight because like the second you call hellbomb, they go like, oh you dropped something. Let's just shoot that instead, and they don't miss. So like
Yeah.
I bring the autocannon turret for that. My primary, if it's not that, is the Scorcher because it has armor piercing through its explosive capability,
Yeah.
and Jim Butcher actually got me on using the sniper because I wasn't actually using it. I didn't like. I wanted
The
more peak
counter
explosive.
diligence. Yeah.
That also the main one, but the call
The
down one,
Mm-hmm.
the
The
special one,
anti-material rifle.
that one, because you
Yes,
can
yes,
one
yes, yes,
shot
yes.
even a Hulk if you get the headshot perfectly right. But it's harder on the Hulk. But yeah, he actually got me on that because what I used to do was the recoilless, and I would actually shoot one of the Hulk's legs. Because if you do that, for people unaware who do play or want to play, shooting it with a heavy missile blows apart like the Hulk's leg, so it just limps, and it gives you so much time in the world to shoot because it's just like this weird giant Hulk buster mech with flamethrowers and a bazillion rockets that weirdly moves faster than the person that can run. It always catches up to you. I don't know how. I don't
Yeah.
understand the physics of it because it's like lumbering, and I'm like
Yes.
sprinting in light armor, and I'm like I'm running really fast. Like I'm a soldier, like a well-conditioned soldier running really fast. Why are you catching up to me? The math isn't
Right.
mathing.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The math
No,
isn't
the Hulks
mathing.
are pretty. Yeah.
And like the Chargers that can Tokyo drift, they need to fix that.
Oh
You've
yeah.
had
Oh
that
yeah.
that bug, right? Like where like you're running and they stagger glitch and they just slide sideways and they just slam into you. And you're like, did you just pause and then start drifting.
Did
Like
you,
what?
what did you do?
And then
Yeah,
they
yeah,
launch
yeah,
you out of orbit because a giant rhino bug made of like hard chitin or however you pronounce the armor.
yeah.
Um, his body tackling you. And you're like, I don't understand what happened. It's like become a meme at this point, like how you die in that game.
They are jerks, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, such a fun game. Yeah, but I'm with you. Like there are moments where I get so mad at it, and it's usually bots. Even though I generally like, I mean, I really enjoy playing against the bots. But like, if I drop right on those detector towers, which I always call the Eye of Sauron, like,
Yes, everyone calls
oh
it that. Yeah, yeah.
God, that's the worst thing,
The
right? You
amount,
start the
the
mission, and
amount
all
of
of a sudden there's like
spawns.
8 goddamn drop ships all right on top of you.
That or the random jammer you don't know is there until you go look for it. I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
like
yeah.
that.
The stratagem jammer. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That can be annoying.
yeah,
I
yeah.
feel like honestly those are a little bit easier to deal with though than those
They
detector
can.
towers.
I really like, and this is a cheap out answer, and I admit it, but the ones that have the bot fabricators built in, so you can just shoot that from far away.
Of course.
Because
Yeah.
like that's one reason if I have the way to play, I want everyone else is carrying the right gear, so I can kind of be a weird fuck boy for bots. If that's the thing, I
Right.
want to run the eruptor. I want
Oh
the
yeah, yeah,
max explosion builds for taking out objectives. Like I am happy doing that. I will bring
yeah,
down orbital laser. I'll bring orbital rail cannon. I'll bring a heavy and that, and I'll use my primary gears like grenade pistol, grenades, stun grenades to at least help the team like pause bots,
yeah,
freeze them, and then
yeah,
eruptor. It's like I'll blow up every building.
yeah,
I get satisfaction of watching them lose all their property. I don't
yeah,
know why. It's
yeah.
like
No,
I
I'm
will
with
take
you.
away your ships. I will take away your buildings. I will take away your homes. Like
I
I'm
will
like
take it.
weird bot.
I will salt the lands. There will
Yeah,
be no bots. Yes, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
no
yeah.
bots. I'm like bot IRS. I'm here to repossess all this land. It's all for Super Earth. Like, you can pay your taxes. Like, piss off. I'm here to take your samples too.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's the build I want to run. I just can't because everyone runs whatever they want, and there's like very little team cohesion when you go on randoms,
Yeah, yeah, right.
which is
Yeah, yeah.
fun, but
When's
it
the last
also
time you
sucks.
ever did the buddy reload? Right?
I've never actually done it. Believe it or not, I've never
Yeah,
got.
no, I
Yeah,
believe it.
it
Yeah, I
is
know.
so cool. Like I
Yeah,
know the mechanic's cool. I never get to do it.
right.
So
No,
my
yeah,
builds all like I have to be light mostly because I know I'm gonna run away from something big, so I can get the reload off.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, so like when you do you run the spear with the bots and you're just hitting the fabricators with the spear? That's pretty satisfying.
Actually, no. When I do bots, if I can use the
The
primary that I
AMR.
want, it'll
Yeah.
be the Eruptor, or I'll also use the crossbow. The crossbow got, I think it's a self buff. It's really good now. You can
Really?
actually take out a lot of bots with it. It's also one shot on the Fabricator, and
Right.
weirdly, it's immediate AOE detonations better than the grenade pistol. So you can kind of like whiff your shot as long as you're with it. Like you know how if you hit the grenade pistol in the angle and it hits the vent, but doesn't even if it goes in, but it hits like the top
Yeah.
corner of the vent, it doesn't
Yeah.
count. The
Yeah.
crossbow counts for that weirdly. Like it has a much more forgiving like explosive radius within the thing.
Someone actually told me that the crossbow you could hit the fab anywhere and it'll blow up.
I haven't tested that. I will try that next time though because
Yeah,
I find
yeah.
that interesting. I didn't know that.
I do know
But
that that is true with the commandos, which is
yeah,
super
yeah.
sick.
The commando. I don't know if that's broken or it's by intent. Maybe it's like an AP incendiary round, like it's armor piercing.
Right.
It goes in. That I have tried. I have just hit them like in the back because I saw when the first came out like an IG reel of that, and someone was just shooting them in the back and sideways. I'm like, does that really
Yeah.
work that way? And I just tried it the first match. I was like, okay, that does work that way. And the cooldown's so fast on that. Like I actually
I
do
know.
like the commando too.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I've started like I mean my favorite thing now because I'm like you. I want to be the IRS. I just want to take the shit, take their homes. Goodbye. You know,
yeah.
like take out a light outpost from miles away with that commando. So I'll drop the commando, like especially if I got good visibility on the map and like somewhere up high, literally just like yeah, see like a light outpost and poof, just shoot it with the commando. And it's
That's
done.
why I like the Eruptor though, because most people don't know they haven't bothered it. The Eruptor has a full sniper magnification if you scroll through it, so you can
Sure,
like just camp, and if you're at the right angle, just boom, just keep pinging different objectives from really
but
far.
you
It's
do
a
have
high
to hit the
explosive.
vent for it, right? With the
Yeah,
eruptor.
yes,
Right,
yes.
right, right.
But I don't mind that. This maybe it's ADHD. I find it stimulating to try to line up the shot. I actually like the lead drop and figuring that out. I've always liked that in video games. I don't think that's
Nice.
mentally healthy, actually. I just like it. It's weird.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
when I
I'm
used to
on
play
board.
Apex all the time, I love sniping specifically because of that. It's
Okay.
like even when snipers went the meta, I'm like, I want to hit someone 100, like 800 yards away and piss them off. Like, well, who just hit me across the map? Like, why? Like, why? There was a time I had almost one of the longest kills in that game, which was like there was a special game mode. It was just shotgun and Kraber, which is like the 50 cal, and the
Mhm.
game but has the most insane lead drop. And like I remember, I think it was a weekend where I had like a 600 meter, and this was like when the game was still really early, like a 600 like meter just shot, and it was ridiculous, or 600-yard shot. And I remember the guy I killed got really pissed because he posted about it, and I was like, "That's me." Like I saw the video, and I was like, I was
I
like,
can,
that's me.
yeah.
Like I killed you across the map, and he was like, "F this dude," because like it was like 4 shots I took to kill him because he's just sitting up there in this tower looking around, bonk, and I knocked him, and his teammate revived him. But then by the time I cocked, I think this is when like a character lifeline could do like a far revive, like she didn't have to stay out, she could touch you and go
Yeah,
hi, and her
yeah.
bot would revive you. And he got back up with like I think they also have there's like a special armor like ability where if you have it, your teammate comes up with most of their health already back.
Hmm.
And he ran around the corner, healed, and came back. And then I got a body shot on him and broke him again. And you could just see he was pissed because the character just did this, like looking around, like who? And he ran back and healed. And then I knocked him again, the third shot, and his teammate went to actually heal him. And I shot the second shot, they headshot them, so it counted as a team wipe. And then he posted that, and I was like, yeah, that was me. That was me knowing you. And my team lost the map. It was like a duo. I was like, we lost. Like we didn't do
Yeah,
that great. I just had the pleasure of like, I really loved that. I just like,
doesn't
I really
matter.
like sniping. I
You
don't know
won
why.
in your heart,
I
right?
won in
Yeah.
my heart. Yeah, the real
um.
friends were the shots I took along the way.
All right. That's funny. So one more Helldivers thing. How good is the writing and the story and whatever? Like, I love the satire of it. I
I love
love.
the satire of it. I don't know where they're going with the story because I really feel like half of it is being memed and made up as a reaction to us. Because one of the few live service games where they clearly react to player bases online,
Yes.
but they're clearly picking up from the lore in book one, right? Or game one, and they're just reiterating it for two, which is not a
Yeah.
bad thing. But like how we just made that we like what collapsed the planet into a black hole. But everyone who goes visits the black hole, it's like a wormhole, and we hear
Yeah.
like noises coming out of it, and we're like, there are noises coming out of that on Twitter. And then the devs are like, nah, no, and we're like, yeah, we just posted a clip, like you're lying. It's like when the Shriekers first came out, people like everyone's tweeting like, hey, they're finding bugs on some of these worlds. These weren't in the game before, and the devs literally report like, nope, nope. They start gaslighting us on purpose as part of it. Like, nope, that's
Yeah.
anti-democratic.
Yeah.
You're lying. We're reporting you. It's bug propaganda. And
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
going back to book one, it's like our game one. There's a faction called the Illuminate, and I've never played game one, so I don't know. But I know the factions because I have looked into the lore, and like they're like these weird space wizard people, and this has like all their hallmarks, and like other people in the lore are saying like, oh yeah, that's where these guys are coming from, because every time in the game, like as part of the satire, the joke has been when we try to do something, we make things worse as a species. So when we started like spraying what was it, termicide, bug spray on these planets, we created a new mutation, which was the Shriekers. We collapsed the planet into a black hole, and now there's noises coming through it. It's like we opened the doorway to the
Yeah.
Illuminate, and then we're drilling those holes to drop the nukes on bug planets. I don't know if you noticed, but on more worlds, there are these giant like dune worm like
Bones.
molting shells and
Uh.
skeletons around different points. Everyone's like, that's the Hive Lords, because apparently the first game had like these giant dune worms, right? Like Shai
Yeah.
Hulid. And now on some planets there are actually these giant molts and skeletons of these giant worms. Not all of it in one, but you'll see like giant monster molt. You're like, that doesn't belong to any bug. And you see like a giant like rib cage or something just sitting there randomly. And everyone's
Right.
like, yeah, it's like we are drilling the hole. Because if you actually go back to the holes in those worlds after people went up, there's weird like earthworm like gurgly sounds coming through, like the ones from
Oh,
Lord of the
great.
Rings, like the cavern worms that come through.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can hear it because I actually did that one map and I called the player. I was like, "Do you hear that?" He's like, "Yeah, it's like something's gurgling down there." And like, yeah, we're like, okay, maybe we're pissing off like the worm god, and
Yeah.
like that's what's
Yeah.
gonna
Right.
happen in the lore. It's like, hey, because you guys pissed off like the creator of this planet or like the center of this planet, it's everything. Like all these worm monsters are gonna come out now. You pissed off like Big Dad or Big
The,
Mom, whatever.
right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's about all I know
That-
with the lore.
that's fair. Like, yeah, I do feel too. Like they're kind of they're coming up with things as it goes, and like some of like it seems like there's like direction, like with the black hole, and it feels like it's gonna be moving faster, and then there's just like, nah, you're gonna just kill a billion bugs.
Yeah.
It's almost like
Well,
they
the
need
devs went
like,
on vacation publicly. They actually announced that, like, yeah. So they're like they're giving us the last war bond, I think, which I'm gonna get like stabbed by HellDivers devs for this. Like, I'm kind of getting tired of the war bonds. I do have gripes. As much as I love the game, I want them to fix core mechanics like net code, crashing, weapon balance, bugs,
yeah,
like core functionality before we get more stuff. Make the base as fun as possible and reliable before you give us more stuff just to like entertain us. Because then it starts feeling like EA, right? Where like, here's a new battle pass, here's a new season. It's like, yeah, but there's core functionality issues. Can we just fix that first? I'd be happier with no new updates if like everything about the game was 100% smooth.
yeah. Yeah. Makes me think of like Blizzard back in the day when like WoW first came out. It was like the thing that they did really, really well was polish the shit out of that game. You knew that it was going to be like it was gonna run well, and it was gonna be smooth. But
That's cool because I unfortunately never had the cool like formative WoW experience. A lot of modern day SFF nerds have. A lot of them have that cool story.
yeah,
I never played WoW. I did play other Blizzard games, like I played Warcraft, the RTS version, and I
yeah,
really liked that. I never got into StarCraft, I never introduced
yeah,
to it. I did Diablo 2, not 1, which was like that was like the revolutionary thing when I first tried that. I
yeah.
had never played like a dungeon crawler at that time, going through like a
Oh,
loot based RPG. My earliest RPGs were very more JRPG. Whether Zelda doesn't count, I guess, in the traditional sense. Like yes, it's a Japanese RPG, but it's so story centric versus like the Final Fantasy, which like the Final Fantasies are also very story centric. But the combat is so the turn-based combat was such a feature of that. And then when I played Diablo 2, that was completely different for me. I thought that was like really cool. That was about
right.
the time I started getting into the Elder Scrolls games on PC because someone had a PC copy of Daggerfall.
Nice. Yeah, yeah. I remember playing like Morrowind back in the day. Yeah,
Oh,
that was
Morrowind was something else. When I got that, I got it on Xbox. That was revolutionary.
right.
That cemented Elder Scrolls as like my favorite fantasy franchise. Like I have a limited edition of like the Alduin, uh, the Bane of Kings dragon statue up on my wall. I live
Nice.
like 30 minutes from Bethesda Softworks, and I have actually tried to go work for them multiple times when I was younger before writing took off, and it never
That's
worked out.
cool.
I always kept trying to break in as a game tester, and they always kept hiring more and more like older gamers with experience. I'm like, let me in,
Let
just
me
let
in.
me in,
Let me in. Yeah,
let
yeah,
me in.
yeah. Man, that's rad. I'm
Yeah.
gonna. I'm not that. I could drive to Epic Games in Raleigh, and I kind of want to just show up sometime and be like, I don't know, see what I can see. Like, I don't know, maybe like I know like Blizzard has like a big statue out front. I don't know if
Oh,
Epic has something
I
like that.
completely believe that because Bethesda did. Bethesda, when I went, they had stuff from the franchise that they bought. Oh my god, Wolfenstein. So they
Oh,
had
nice, nice, nice.
some of
Yeah.
the Wolfenstein like power armor guys, and then they had I forget what they're called, but like the Nazi giant robot dogs, like the one that one mission, like that freaky super like 20 foot. That thing was there.
Wow,
And I think they did have like a bronze cast Dovahkiin as well,
that's
like in
cool.
one corner. But like the main office, or like you come if you're a guest or they're like interview or something.
Yeah.
Those were the two big statues that at the time when at least I went, I saw there. So I completely Epic and Blizzard would definitely have that too. I think every game company probably would. I think
Nice.
it's just cool. You should have like parts of your IP out decorating stuff.
Right. That's pretty neat. Well, Ronnie, it's been about an hour and a half, so I probably should let you go. But this
Okay.
has been a lot of fun chatting. Where
Yeah,
can people find
absolutely.
and follow you online, Ronnie?
Yeah. So Facebook/ RR Virdi. I'm decently active and I do respond to comments there. Twitter is where I'm most active these days, or Instagram, both of which are at RR Virdi. I do have a Blue Sky, which has now kind of become a placeholder because I thought that place would pop off. I'm not on Threads because limited bandwidth. I figure at this point I should maybe just be more available in fewer places so I can at least respond to people. Because, like I said earlier, people have been so sweet with their time and supporting my books. I'd like to at least, when I'm available, try to be as available as possible. So long
Right.
as it's not a detriment to my writing and give back.
Yeah. No, makes sense. Yeah. All right. So go find Ronnie where he is.
Yeah,
Right. Right.
thank you.
And then interact, and like he's actually available. That's what's good. Yeah. Oh. Uh. Yeah. This has been a great chatting with you. I appreciate it.
Likewise.
I'm looking forward to getting to meet you in person, Dragon Con. That should be pretty fun.
Thank you, man.
Um,
Yeah, it will be. Yeah, Dragon Con. Oh God, it's only a month away, so that's gonna be great.
I know,
But
right? Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
very
It's not
different
that far.
experience because I'm there for work. So, but I
Yeah.
still get to enjoy it. But I'm definitely gonna be walking and paneling in the Georgia heat and humidity.
I mean,
It gets hot.
that sounds for me.
I'm
That's
warning you.
hashtag goals. So like, I don't.
It
You
gets
like,
hot.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Be
True.
prepared. It
Yeah,
usually is 95,000 people within like a few little blocks, all walking outside in summer in Georgia. Like it's gonna
yeah.
get hot, even indoors. It's gonna get hot.
Oh boy. All
Bring
right.
bring actually like seriously bring a water bottle because the
Yeah,
hotels have like little water stations. Fill up a water bottle if you can.
yeah.
It gonna
That's
get
good
hot.
advice. I've been like, the heat has really been bothering me lately. So yeah, I'm gonna have to do that.
Like as hot as you think it is, it's gonna be worse. Which is not to dissuade anybody. Like I Dragon Con is like, I know we're not supposed to have favorite cons. It's been the one I've been the most welcome at. I love it. I am always trying to go there. I'm actually bringing my girlfriend there this year.
Nice.
It's gonna be her first Dragon Con. Like this con is very special to me. And I'm going despite the heat. Like I said, it's like clearly it's like really important to me. Just a warning, like that is something that seriously does bother and affect people. I actually know someone who got like heat exhaustion there. Like just take care of yourself. If you're going to Dragon, it's going to be a great time. Just hydrate and be ready for the heat. That's it.
Good advice for all the time. Take care of yourself
Yeah.
and
Yep.
hydrate. You know. Yes.
Yes.
I love
Because
it.
I have not taken my care of self. Take care of myself there at times before. That and I've learned the hard way.
Yeah, that's no fun. That's no
Yeah.
fun. Well, thank you again. Thanks everyone for watching. Appreciate it. Thanks for hanging out. Those of you in the chat, Jackson, Bo, Joe, everyone else, Herman, really appreciate it. And for you, Ronnie, for everyone else, if no one's told you yet today, you're an absolute legend.